Hey, college sports fans, I made sure to wear a shirt with a collar for this one because we are joined today by Director of Athletics Graham Neff at Clemson. It's wonderful to have him here, and I can't wait to see where this conversation goes. This is the Reign Supreme All A podcast, Season 5.
I'm Daniel Shirley. I did not wear a collared shirt. I'm sorry, Graham. I apologize for that. I do have on my Clemson gear, so that's at least good. But we appreciate our special guest, Graham Neff, the AD at Clemson. Graham, thanks for being here.
Daniel, Bill, thanks for having me. I have a collared shirt on. Thank you, Bill. And it's purple. It's we solid orange Friday around here. So Friday, wear your orange. Today that we're recording this is a Tuesday. So sometimes we do go purple Thursday. I don't know if how it's a little bit like Fight Club. You don't talk about it. You just know on a Thursday when someone's
Right.
wearing purple, you give them a little nod. But I pulled it out here on a Tuesday.
Graham, the reason we wanted to have you on, obviously, we're Clemson graduates. We love Clemson athletics. We care about the athletic department, and just wanted to get your thoughts on just kind of where Clemson fits in right now with this changing landscape. I mean, since you took over, the changes that have happened, and I would imagine you wake up every day thinking, okay, what's going to be different today? Because that's the way it feels to us.
Uh, Ditto, yes. It's why we sit here. It's mid June of
Yeah.
26, and just because this is a kind of a script on some of my circuit this spring and summer, so to speak. NIL became permissive from an NCAA standpoint July 1st of 21. So we're still less than 5 years that NIL's even been an acronym that some of us are familiar with, and so. And over those 5 years, it is again to your point, Daniel, about four and a half of which I've been in this role. It's taken on so many different forms and fashions. It was first you couldn't even really talk about NIL or it's just something. Oh, the kids and they could kind of go do that on themselves. That lasted like a couple of weeks, and then schools began to be able to be involved. Obviously, the competitive aspect of it, donor funded collectives. How does that then work with your fundraising organization, IPTE, obviously for us, to now just, last summer, July of 25, house house era, where it's rev share, 20 million approximately directly from the schools. And then incredibly importantly, how you facilitate or generate commercial NIL, a new form of it, but NIL still above and beyond your cap, above the cap NIL. And so that's a choppy way to show just the amount of change, the rate of change, your point, Daniel, in 5 years. And that's just on the one topic of NIL
Right.
into revenue share, amongst all the other moving parts in college athletics, from the legal environment, media, conference, professionalization, generating revenues. All the work in Congress and in DC, that's certainly very high priority right now. So it's been a lot, but listen, to circle it back to keep it local and here at Clemson, couldn't be more bullish on where we're positioned, what's ahead. Sure, that gets into the business of college sports and Clemson athletics, and I'm happy to dive into. I'm sure you guys want to drive there a little bit, but ultimately, scoreboards matter, and it's really easy to start with football. That drives our business train here, of course, and so the continued investment there. And performance and all the tailwind and the rising tides, whatever the analogy is from an IPTE standpoint, just the energy within the department and all of our sports. It's incredibly important. That's unchanged. The importance and the investment there, so to speak, for Clemson football. And I'm pumped to lean into that more and what that looks like ahead for Clemson.
Well, you talk about this is a perfect time to do this, right? Because it's the end of the year. All the sports are done. There were a couple that were kind of disappointing this past school year. Football obviously is a big one. Everybody knows that. Baseball had a tough year. How do you, as an AD, deal with those kinds of seasons? Or is it? I guess it's probably different for each sport, right?
It is. At home, the Neff boys that are are about to turn 10, 7, and 7, and at least two of the three of them are rather locked in on watching whatever the sports are these, at the time of the calendar. Implication being, I mean, we've caught most of the, regional, super regionals, Omaha's on, and it's hard for me to watch that. It's sour medicine, not only after Clemson,
Right.
it would be eliminated, or this year, to your point, Daniel, the disappointment of not even make the NCAA tournaments and or the tournament. And Eric would be the first one to jump on here and tell you not acceptable and eager ahead as he's right in the middle of recrafting the roster and some of the tenets of the program and retrenching ahead. So listen, to your point, unapologetic or not, unapologetically, well, apologetically, but unabashed. Didn't perform in those two key sports for all the things at Clemson, let alone the business element of it. However, amongst our 21 sports, the broad-based notion of college athletics these days in Clemson, we have a really unique story to tell with the additions of gymnastics and lacrosse, both within the last 4 years. Both are top 10 programs, gymnastics winning ACC championship. Yeah. Really proud of that. And so I'm sitting here in my office and my whiteboard that I keep pretty active, have all the sports listed. I'm actually just going through kind of exit meetings, I say, with spring sport head coaches and just kind of getting into off season and resetting on resources and needs and strategy, all that. All that to be said, they all matter. Want to win in all of them, period. And I would tell you this year, despite, again, football, baseball easily kind of, capturing some of the performance focus, 3 ACC championships. We made the NCAAs in 14 of our 17, call it NCAA championship sports. Track gets consolidated in there. Football obviously just has bowl and then CFP. So across the board, I think it was a really positive year. Basketball, this was the first time in 26 years that both men's and women's basketball made the NCAA tournament in the same year. Yes, both lost in the first round. You get the agony of March Madness. But to take a half step back, the status and the trajectory for both of those programs couldn't be more proud of. And so there's the forest and the trees, and it starts with football from a business standpoint, right, of course. But it's a good look back from my lens. While that informs where we need to continue to lean in, invest, innovate, and continue to cast our high expectations ahead across the board.
Yeah, I'm glad you
jumped in and mentioned that individual national champion in track and field very recently, because Coach Kobe is distant family of mine, so I can't go to the family reunion and not have been mentioned. So
very good, Bill. We actually had 2 of them. Gladys Chipnachich won the 800 in the indoors in February or March, national champion, and then Shantae Foreman in the triple jump just last weekend. So 2 national champions on the individual level, in addition to the 3 ACC championships this year.
Terrific.
Grant, I'm glad you did that because, and you didn't even mention softball. I grew up in Anderson and just always wondered, why doesn't Clemson have a softball program? And we've seen the success the program's had. So close last year to getting to the College World Series. I mean, just unbelievably close.
60 feet away. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, you score one more run, you're going to Oklahoma City. So, and the gymnastics program has been a huge hit. The basketball programs love the Coach Poppy hire. What Coach Brownell has done, is kind of struggled early, but what he's built there, you can see the success there as well. So, so I love all of that for sure, and we're big fans of all the sports. The lacrosse is so fun to watch. What about the lacrosse, real quick, before I do have a football question to ask you? Just the idea of building the women's lacrosse program stadium only. Is it still the only one in the country? Because I mean, that to me, and where you built it is just, I would imagine that's a huge draw for that program.
It is the only, thank you, Daniel. It's the only women's only dedicated lacrosse facility. There are other lacrosse facilities and stadium in the country, but a lot of them are all the others of those would be with programs that have both men's and women's lacrosse. So it's only dedicated is kind of what that is, which we're proud of. Was named. There was a supporter, Deb Conklin, who gave a large, we call them Cornerstone Partner Gifts, $2.5 million or more to support the program and the facility. It's interesting. I'll tell a little story just because it's fresh. And I met with Allison Kolick, our lacrosse head coach, yesterday. Just again into the off season, and I do that with all of our coaches, just to stay really connected and plugged in with all of them, all of our programs. Back to the broad-based nature, it really matters. And so we were just kind of debriefing on all the things within Clemson lacrosse and the lacrosse industry. And she said we were talking about resources, right? And NIL and rev share and scholarships and how's that all work in lacrosse? Because that's a little different than women's tennis. It's a little different than basketball, right? So all the little nuances per sport, I love to lean into those and just be well read on those. Allison is she was articulating that as she's fully funded with scholarships, IPTAY, really unique. It's a big roster, 36 on roster, a lot of financial commitment there from a scholarship standpoint. And everyone's trying to figure out, hey, NIL or rev shares or some of that. Allison said she's had to not necessarily fight, but manage the reputation that Clemson lacrosse has of having all these resources and revenue share and NIL because they see that they, meaning other collegiate lacrosse coaches and recruits and programs, all this investment in Clemson lacrosse, dedicated facility, only one in the country, up on the lake, your point, Daniel. And we're 4 years in and we're a top 10 program. So just this success, how we're recruiting, holy cow, top classes in the country. Right. And so her point is the reputation of Clemson lacrosse is, oh, well, they have all the money. And Alice, and they are well resourced, but she has to frame an expectation set of, hey, well, here's how it works at Clemson and scholarships and, roster management things. So I just thought it was a really interesting frame because it's rare, not just at Clemson, but most places in the country that kind of no one has that reputation. Well, they have all the money. I mean, there's some schools that have that, let's be honest, but usually it's how, well, they don't have it. That's not exactly how it works here. And so she has to combat a little bit of that narrative just because of the reputation of investment and the reality of investment in the program. So that's a one-off of a lacrosse story, but it's indicative of your point there, Daniel. It's
fun. I mean, I'm still learning about the sport, to be honest, as I watch it, but it's fun to see what she's building, what you guys are building there. You mentioned money, and obviously that drives everything, right, with how this stuff works. In football, and Dabo has said this many times, Clemson's never had the biggest budget or the best recruiting classes or all that. When you've talked to him since last season, and again, I know you don't want to get into specifics or private conversations, but I mean, we all know how driven and competitive Dabo is. What's your confidence level or excitement to see them get the program back to what it's been in the past under him?
And that's the thing. Well said. And I came here. This will be my 14th. It's wild to think. It'll be my 14th football season here at Clemson. And so I came in 2013, and I'm coming off the heels of the LSU game, right. Chick-fil-A Bowl, or Peach Bowl, Chick-fil-A Bowl, whatever it was at the time. And then my first season was my first game here at Clemson on staff was the Georgia game. Right. And the Musburger following the buses around the hill. I'd been to games here in the Valley before, but that was my first game on staff. Anyway, my point is where I was going. I wasn't here for Dabo as the wideout coach. And just his dogged nature and reputation from a recruiter standpoint. You get the CJ Spiller stuff. And but I talked to other coaches that were colleagues of his at the time, or maybe different staff. And they're like, you had to be careful if you were, if Dabo as a position coach, and Dabo was your recruited in an area. I think you had some Florida and some Georgia, and there was one of your position players that played your position in his area. So you kind of put Dabo on it. They were like, you better really want that guy because Sweeney was going to be after it. Right. So my point is, I know his reputation even just as a wideout coach have lived it and partnered with him in various roles as the head coach and how he continues to lean into that. That being said, resources, games changing, how you recruit, how you retain, very different now than it was a year ago, than it was 5 years ago, than it was when Sweeney was the wideout coach in 2007, right? All that.
Right.
I think that the balance of how it works for Clemson football, which was your question, but really all of Clemson sports, it's different. Clemson is different. That's kind of part of my script if I'm ever in front of recruits or whatever. And hopefully and it's not for everybody, but it resonates. It's genuine. It's authentic. And my point is money's important. And we have resources and we're deploying them in strategic ways. So that's going to be part of the conversations. It's just natural. And, like it or not, it is specifically in football, but also how that fits within what the focus is for a student from a recruitment standpoint or a retention standpoint, the total development and, culture is a buzzword, but like just how it works at Clemson. And I think you're seeing now, I know that we're in summer of 26 and building a recruiting class, and there's been a lot of good energy there. So you're seeing some of the adaptation to how that fits, some of the resource deployment there is a little different. At the end of the day, within most rosters, certainly football, the evaluation, who are your kids that you're targeting, and how they fit within your program and needs, not only high school recruiting, but retention or portal, and then valuation. What's your dollar assignment there, and how does that fit within the market or who you're competing against? And so the Venn diagram, my staff laughs when I go Venn diagram analogies, but the Venn diagram overlap of that continues to change. But I think you're really seeing that strategy come to fruition more and more here for Clemson football, but for a lot of our sports.
When you look ahead, again, it's something could change tomorrow by the time, before we even get this posted. We know how that works. But when you look ahead, I mean, you said you're bullish about where Clemson is positioned. I mean, what makes you feel that way, right? I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just curious, what is it that makes you feel like, okay, we're in a good spot for whatever is next, and super leagues and whatever is coming up in 5 or 6 years?
Well, it's interesting, and only because I was having a conversation earlier this week with somebody else on the topic, even IPTAY. So I'll take a half step back, but just to frame some specifics to you. We're coming off a year we were 7-6. We had LSU home game, which was a monster draw and drove a lot of. We had a lot of anticipation last year, top whatever program. Right. And so now, great, we don't have an LSU game. We have the Gamecocks here. Notre Dame starts next 27. My point is, like, there's a lot of reason to have questions about, gosh, like Clemson and IPTAY memberships and season ticket numbers. All of our figures are beyond what our goals and targets were. We're at an important time of the year in June and fiscal years and things like that. So I feel like, again, perhaps when there's like the most questions at hand, understandably in some regard, like you just see the staying power and the passion and just the support of what Clemson is, Clemson family. And that means football, sure, but it means all of it. We started here with lacrosse and gymnastics discussion. So I just think that's really, really that's seen not only locally here and in our job to run the business, but nationally. And so when you talk about, again, buzzwords, Super League, or just moving parts within the industry, like Clemson is a known brand, powerful. We got to keep doing our part. And that means scoreboards and football and all the sports. That means how we position ourselves from a branding standpoint and television. That means how we're innovating and driving revenues. We have Clemson Ventures that we launched a couple of years ago that ties into NIL and a professional sports business model. So those type of things, we got to keep doing the work. But just the staying power of Clemson is something that we don't rest on, but is really, really, I think, strong, and it shows itself. All that to be said, the last part here, Daniel, is listen, from a dollars and cents standpoint, our budget's about 210, 220 million. Which is just a big number. What does that mean? How does that rank? It's about top 20 in the country. Okay, so it depends on how does that rank? What the top 20. It ultimately comes down to how we're evaluating and valuing from a roster standpoint, football, all the sports. How we're being thoughtful and wise with our resources. The business is changing. We have new expenses, revenue share, NIL that we got to drive and lean into, and that has so much more relationship to competitive success than ever before. And so money's got to come from somewhere. So we got to raise it. We've done things with concerts and with Clemson Ventures and with sales and sponsorships and alcohol sales, right? These type of things that are hard to do, but we got to grow the business, raise the revenue, and then be really strategic about how we deploy that to drive dollars and run the business. So that's a lot of words. I know I'm guilty of that from time to time, but it's indicative of the bullishness and really where my focus is on behalf of the department ahead.
Good words. Lots of words. Okay. That's okay. Good words.
That's all right. One of the things that Coach Dabo Swinney has talked about a lot publicly is the alignment at Clemson. And I think that's helped with the climb. I think it's helped with that staying power, just as an observer like I am. At the same time, you mentioned all those things at the top of this conversation that were like all these external forces that are so new in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. What have been the biggest challenges to maintaining that alignment as those external forces are kind of coming at you this way and that way?
Yeah, I like the phrase there, Bill, of external forces. That's a good way to say it. I'll pivot with your answer. I'll drive your answer towards a new president coming, Kevin Guskiewicz, right? Yeah. And so coming from Michigan State, strong AAU flagship type university. Prior to that, North Carolina, there's a lot of familiarity and time within the league and within the our region of the country, so the Carolinas. I knew Kevin a little bit, President Guskowitz a little bit from his time at UNC, just kind of hallways and cursory a little bit. He's very close with former President Clements, who was such a key part of the alignment portion of your question there, Bill. And he's cut out of the same mold in a lot of regard, or at least specifically in his lens and value prop to athletics. Comes from a sports or sports medicine type background, a leading neuroscientist in the country. So he's published and researched a lot on health, wellness, concussion area. So he knows ball. But most importantly, I think his reputation is, and what I know of him to be, let alone the time he and I have spent together in his kind of transition or onboarding here to Clemson, is how athletics fits within the strategy of a higher ed institution, acts complementary towards the institutional and academic focus of Clemson, of an institution, but then specifically what that looks like at Clemson. He's going to live and feel, and he's not going to be able to, he's still got a learning curve to it. He would self-admit, but I get really eager for his how he'll look to lead the institution, but then what that looks like for athletics and how that fits, I think, really uniquely at Clemson. So that's a key transition point. Jim, for 12 years, holy cow, couldn't have been a bigger supporter and valuer of what athletics is to himself, to the institution. We saw that in so many different ways. And I think Kevin's cut out of the same cloth. He has his own style about it. But I'm eager to partner with him and support him in his role at president. So that's a huge part of to your point, Bill, call it the secret sauce, call it the, moments of transition here. Like that's a key piece. But Clemson was able to attract a president like Kevin Guskowitz for really your alignment reasons. I would even say it that way. So it starts with our trustees and how that looks throughout the institution. It's a huge part of why I'm here, still here, so to speak. I don't mean it that way, but it's just really unique at Clemson. And so President Guskowitz is going to fold in and be a huge key and cog of that right away.
Wow, that's fantastic. And another thing, throwing out some other questions, because another thing you brought up was coming here in 2013. And I kind of wanted to ask, what was your impression of Clemson before you even had the specter of possibly working here? And what are some of the things that you really liked about it that you kind of want to take from those early days here and make sure that they stay, intact?
I'll give you two quick stories. One is, or maybe one story, but the first just kind of recollections back. So grew up in Atlanta, suburbs of Atlanta, and went to school at Georgia Tech, as you know, and had some good friends from high school, really good friends that were students at Clemson. And so I came to probably four Clemson Georgia Tech games. So admittedly, I was wearing gold or white in the stands. My first game was in 2002. I was a freshman at Georgia Tech. I came to the Georgia Tech game, Georgia Tech Clemson game. Clemson won. AJ Suggs threw an interception driving into the end zone on the east side of the stadium. It was a rainy day, so you guys might have been in the stands too. But it was rainy, so I was in like a yellow poncho, Georgia Tech on the hill. I was like that guy on the hill. So, and then I had many games, 3 or 4 games in Littlejohn when I was a manager on the Georgia Tech basketball game. Right. Came and sat at the end of the bench next to the student section. They're yelling and banging the wooden bleachers, right? So I've experienced in that regard. Coming to Clemson, had the reputation and the Georgia Tech Clemson rivalry. So, I thought at the time, still believe it to be true, of just the recognition or what's the phrase on the tip of my tongue? The mutual respect of a rivalry. Similar type schools with curriculum and heavy engineering and architect background, high academic profile schools, just good people that love the student body experience and the fit. So I just had a great respect from Clemson, even as like a student, so to speak, to the extent you have that. It means a little different at that stage, but had that significantly. Now, the quick story, Bill, I was working at Middle Tennessee State near Nashville for a couple of years before coming to Clemson to work. And, Dan Radakovich, our prior AD, called and had the opportunity to come. And so I distinctly remember having a conversation with Kristen and just about the opportunity and, hey, what do we think? We're young and trying to figure out life a little bit. Kristen's first instinct was, well, gosh, orange and purple, those are cool colors. I could do something with the wardrobe on that. That was her. But here, and this ties back to, Daniel, some of your earlier point about football, but then baseball. Baseball's really important here at Clemson. Personally, for me, I grew up in Atlanta in the 90s. Like baseball is my first love. Atlanta Braves, I could tell you all the rosters. I distinctly remember having this conversation with Kristen in 2012 and said, "Hey, Kristen, Clemson baseball is it's a big deal. And Omaha in June and July, like that's what they do. And so, not that we're gonna have to totally plan our summer calendars around Clemson baseball in Omaha, but like that's going to be a thing. And so I say that in a good way, but also like, gosh, like that has some personal effect in some regards. So we want to go and do all that. Well, the reality is I sit here and we haven't made it since 2010. And so I say that really hat in hand of like, and I'd say with Eric sitting right here, like that's what Clemson baseball is. And it's really important that we are an Omaha type team program. We are. But we got to perform and get there. And that harkens back all the way to me selling Kristen to come to Clemson and, hey, we're going to be going to Omaha because that's what Clemson baseball does. So I wear that badge and that urgency to do it. And Eric's the guy to lead us there. And we got to invest and we got to go do it. But that it really matters to me personally, let alone I know for the whole program and the whole community.
Wow. Yeah. I love it. And I know you got to jump in about 90 seconds, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you, and I hope we'll talk again sometime down the road.
Reign supreme all the way. I love the pod. Happy to jump on more than we have in the past. Thanks for having me, guys. Go Tigers.
Thanks, Graham. Appreciate it.
Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. It's free. It's the best place to catch all our episodes, and it's the best place for you to comment with your reactions. I thought that was pretty amazing. I wasn't sure what to expect, admittedly, and just what a fun conversation and insightful too. Kind of what stood out to you.
Well, Bill, I'll tell you, you and I've been interviewing people for a long time in our careers, and it's interesting when you interview somebody for the first time, right? And Graham, I've followed Graham on Twitter, and he followed me back. I was like, "Whoa, what's Graham doing?" I mean, but I've been really impressed with him as the AD. I think the thing that there's a couple of pieces there that really stood out to me. He's right about the athletic department as a whole being healthy. I mean, seriously, look at the wins just this year: gymnastics, lacrosse, the softball team going back to the NCAA tournament, even though they had so much roster turnover, the two basketball programs. We know what the soccer programs mean at Clemson. But then he also did address football, baseball. I mean, what he said, baseball matters to Clemson. Yeah. I mean, look, I remember us being in school and going during the day and watching day games at Clemson, day Clemson games while maybe we're supposed to be in class. Maybe we went to class and then went to the game. I don't know. But, I mean, it does mean something at Clemson. Football means, to a lot of people, means everything. So it was fun to get his insights on those things. And it is interesting. Like, I think a piece of this for me is the next 10 years. Where is Clemson 10 years from now? And you don't want Clemson to get left out in the cold.
Yeah.
When all these changes happen, because I would think, and, maybe we have Graham on again 10 years now. I don't know, hopefully before then, but
hopefully it won't be 35 years until our next Graham.
Yeah, that's right. I do think he's the right person to lead the program into whatever the next 10 years are. I do think that the thing he said about the evaluation and the valuation for the athletics, for the student athletes, adjusting to changes. Maybe some of the programs have been slow to do that, but I think he's the right guy to get them to do that. So I'm just impressed with him as an AD. I like what he's doing in the athletic department. And he's right. The scoreboard matters.
Yeah.
All that sounds great, what we just said, and what he said was awesome. But as he said, the scoreboard matters. Probably, maybe more now than ever. Don't you think?
It's a chicken or egg thing now, isn't it? Like you have to be, and look, a lot of the things you talk about with like Super League and realignment and all those things, they get made because of business ledger factors more than anything else, and that upsets
Right.
a lot of fans. And I'm not talking about at Clemson, I'm talking about throughout the NCAA.
Yep.
That upsets people, that it's not based on competition. It's not based on, the size of the fan base or the size of the following or the intensity of the following. It's, suddenly Maryland and Rutgers are in a premium conference, and, they don't have that broad competitiveness and high interest the way a lot of Southern schools, Clemson and others, kind of have. So it's really cool to me to hear that that's still very much front of mind. Like, we could have gone off on all the business tangents. There were other business dollars and cents and structure and those kind of things. I nerd out on that stuff. So those were the kind of the questions that I threw aside, because I kind of wanted to know what he thought of Clemson before coming here, and what an answer that was. This is someone who has been inside athletic programs for so very long. As he talked
Yep.
about, 2002 was it that he said that he was with the Georgia Tech basketball team. He's come up through the college ranks. He's seen it at another Power Four institution. He's seen it at a smaller school, Middle Tennessee State. I don't know how you managed to get family to uproot from the Nashville area and come to little old Clemson, but thank goodness it was such a good fit in those ways. He brings all that experience to the table. And would you rather have that, or you look at some schools bringing in an athletic director who was a TV guy, who was a business guy, who was a pro sports guy? You know, I really like the path that he's been on. I think it serves all of Clemson well to be able to look at, hey, yes, there are business things to be dealt with, and he has been, right at the
Right.
forefront of that. And the scoreboard. You got to win. If you're going to be able to feed the business side of things right now, competitiveness is becoming more and more a piece of it. Your cable market matters less than your following now, right? It doesn't matter where they are, it's how many. So what's the old golf the golf cliche, it's not how, it's how many. And that's starting to matter more and more. Cable markets aren't dead, but the sliding scale has changed. So I really enjoyed that conversation for you. He's done a lot of really good conversations on
Yes, yes.
several other
Yep.
shows as well, and I appreciate him joining us. And uh, we got about 90 seconds. If you got anything else.
I look, I just say again, I think we're going to continue to see college sports change, and you need to win for when those changes are coming. You don't want to get left out in the cold. And if you're not winning at that point, you might get left out in the cold.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that he's going to let that happen
There you
in
go.
any of the sports.
Right. And if all these TV deals and all these things are 2030, 2031, the wheels start turning pretty soon, way
Yes.
ahead of that. That's the wheels are going to start turning in a year or two, I think, on
Right.
what happens next. What happens next for Clemson, as a matter of fact, when the 2026 season coming, we'll keep you posted as news breaks. Hope you enjoyed this little departure from what we usually do. And for the Reign Supreme All Podcast Season 5, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.
Connect with us on social media. That's at Clemson Kickoff. Whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Facebook, you'll find us there.